Welcome to PCMC. I'm Mike Bongiorno. I'm here today with my good friend and yours, Mr. Peter Marsh. How are you, Pete?
I'm great, man. I'm happy to be on your show. I love being on your show.
We're happy to have you. Peter, today we are talking about I can't believe this year, 2002 motion picture Bubba Ho-Tep. I really, if you would ask me a week ago, when did Bubba Ho-Tep come out? I would have been like, I don't know, like 2008, 2007,
Yeah.
2002. I was just out of high school. Over
Wow.
20 years. This is over 20 years ago.
Yeah, this movie is about as old as our friendship because we met in the beginning of my college experience.
Wow. And,
Yeah.
and age just as well.
Yes.
So what's your experience with Bubba Hotep?
Really, really great question. So I got my other channels, right? Comic Books Transformed and the Lasser Cast. And there was a period of time where I was going really heavy into interviewing writers, our writers for the Lasser Cast. I always wanted to interview Joe Lansdale because I read a couple of his books and I just really, really liked his writing style. So I knew I had to watch adaptations of his work. And so besides like his Hap and Leonard series, which they made into like a TV show, they had this movie, and there's a couple other movies that are based on Joe Lansdale's stories, but this is probably his most successful, most well known.
I've actually not read anything by him. Is all of his stuff kind of horror comedy, or is that
No,
unique to this?
no, he's a really prolific writer, and he writes in all different genres. And that was actually one of the questions I asked him. I was like, do you have like a plan when you write for different genres? Do you try to write a specific genre? And he said he just likes to write Joe Lansdale fiction. So he writes crime fiction. That was the very first book I ever read by him, was a book called Cold in July, which
Mhm.
they made a movie of that with like Don Johnson and Michael C. Hall. Um, but he's written like straight up dark horror things. He's written uh, a lot of crime fiction that can be fun and kind of silly.
Uh-huh.
He's written goofy, weird stuff.
He definitely has a great sense of humor. I mean, just the high concept of Bubba Hotep is great. And Bubba Hotep, I think, was a short story, or was
Correct.
it was a short story? Yeah.
Yeah, it was in a collection called The King is Dead, Tales of Elvis Post-Mortem. And so,
Oh shit.
yeah.
It's a brilliant idea. Let me see. My history with it was in I've never read anything by Lansdale, but in like high school, and I'm sure you have a similar experience, I found the Evil Dead trilogy
Mhm.
and was super obsessed with it, especially the second movie. And I thought Bruce Campbell was like the greatest. Like if you like horror and then you see, and you like slasher movies of the 80s, and then you kind of come to Evil Dead, instead of a final girl, you have basically like this superhero character and who's funny and like makes jokes. So it's so appealing. And this came out, and I don't remember exactly how I got to it. I guess I must have just bought tickets online, but there was a screening of it somewhere. I don't remember where in Manhattan that was hosted by Bruce Campbell.
Oh my God.
And I'll never forget it. He came, everyone was waiting, and then he came in, and everyone went crazy. There was a girl who had popcorn. He just came by and like took a handful of her popcorn and started eating it. He like plays the role of Bruce Campbell very well. I remember
Hmm.
somebody said, "Say groovy," which is his catchphrase from Evil Dead. And he said, "Who said that? Who said say groovy?" And then some kid was like, "It was me." And he was like, "Yeah, I'd say that if I was your little monkey boy." And then he just basically uh answered questions. Somebody asked about Congo. They were like, "How do you feel about Congo?" And he was like, "I really liked the check that they gave me for Congo." And it was just, it was an amazing experience. And then we saw the film, and it was mind blowing. It's so funny, especially then in 2002. I was right out of high school, so I wanted to like be a filmmaker. So I was really inspired by the idea of a movie that has one setting, just a really good idea, um, made for like basically nothing. I mean, it was this movie. I think is made for like $500,000. Um, they shot it for like 30 days, and I was just blown away by it. And it's still like every time I revisit it, it's still good.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's funny that your entry into it is from Bruce Campbell. That to me, Bruce Campbell is like the third draw for this movie. Like Joe Lansdale's the first, then Don Coscarelli is the second draw, and then Bruce Campbell. And I feel like Bruce Campbell even though he's kind of silly in this movie, it's almost easy to kind of not realize that it's Bruce Campbell because his like Elvis impersonation is so specific
Yeah.
that it doesn't remind you of Ash really at all.
No, not at all. Not at
Yeah.
all. It well this is gonna blow your mind, but I've only seen Phantasm once,
Hmm.
and it was a long time ago,
Hmm.
and I want to see it again because I must have seen it early college, and I remember not liking it. But I
Wow.
also remember thinking like I thought it was a slasher movie for some reason, and I was just kind of I definitely was not smart enough to get it. I hadn't seen any Giallo or Italian stuff, so I definitely was like not understanding what was happening. I want to rewatch it and see if I get it now. But I don't
Yeah.
other than that and this, I haven't seen any other Coscarelli movies.
Okay. Well, we're kind of on a similar page to that. It's interesting because I've only seen Phantasm 1 and Phantasm 2, but I actually like really, really enjoyed those movies. Probably my favorite type of movie is a movie that has world building and there's something new and different to it. And but it's on like a smaller budget and people aren't like sitting there talking about it on social media all the time. Like it's just this kind of thing that you find and it looks different and it has its own world. That's always kind of the most exciting movie to me. And
Did
that's
you
what
like Long Legs?
I didn't see Long Legs yet.
Okay, you remind me of Long Legs what you described.
Yeah, well, believe me, it's on my list. And I would rather see a movie like Long Legs than go see like Alien Romulus or something like that, or even all the other shit that I cover, like the Star Wars stuff and the Marvel stuff, just because, oh, this is coming straight from someone's imagination. They're making it because they're passionate about it, and it's not necessarily controlled by like the fandom. Well, this has to happen
Yeah.
because this is the expectation. It's just this own unique thing. And Coscarelli, I know he did John Dies at the End, which is based on like a book by another author that I really like, but I haven't read that book. Uh Coscarelli also did a an episode of this horror anthology show, and it was based on a Joe Lansdale short story. It was called Incident on a East Texas Road or something like that. Let me see, I can look it up. I have it in my notes, but it was basically for the first episode of Masters of Horror.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's called Incident on and Off a Mountain Road. And
Is
that was the first
yeah.
episode. Yeah. Go ahead.
Did all of Joe Lansdale's story take place in Texas?
Not all of them, but like every single one I've read, and the majority of them do. And he's
Okay.
from East Texas, which I live in Texas, and it's kind of funny because I think like East Texas people have like a very specific accent, so you kind
Okay.
of like, oh, they're from East Texas.
Where this film takes place.
Yeah, exactly.
So we haven't yet said, if for people who haven't seen the film, we haven't yet said the plot, which is it's a really interesting high concept. Um, well, I don't actually. We should go back in the 1980s and 90s. There was a real phenomenon in tabloid journalism in the United States where people would say that they saw Elvis and that Elvis was not dead. This was like a big go-to joke for like sitcoms in the 90s too. Like, oh, I just saw Elvis at the Dairy Queen or whatever. And so I guess that's part of the inspiration here. And it's imagine Elvis Presley before he like really went downhill and died of drug abuse and stuff and got really unhealthy. He was miserable with his life and decided he wanted to get out. So he found a Elvis impersonator that looked really like him and said, "Let's switch lives." Almost like a Prince and Pauper thing, and
Hmm.
you can be Elvis now and have all that comes with being Elvis, rich and fame, or whatever. And I'll just be an Elvis impersonator and I'll still get to perform, but I can have like a normal life and real friends and stuff. And that person got older and broke their hip and now ends up now, I guess they're in their late 60s, early 70s, and they are in a East Texas nursing home, an old age home.
Hmm.
And so that enough is a huge high concept. But then the the antagonist is a mummy who's like a lesser mummy. Not it's not Imhotep. It's Ozzy Davis says it's like his brother. It's a lesser mummy who eats souls, makes its way to East Texas and is basically feeding makes its feeding ground that nursing home because older people like that are are easy to just come to eat their souls.
Hmm.
And him and his friend in the nursing home, JFK, who is played by Ozzie Davis, an African American actor,
Yeah.
fight the mummy.
Yes.
What studio wouldn't want that?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because when you watch it, it seems silly,
Right.
but I don't think that it's stupid. That was the
Yes.
distinction I was trying to make in my head when I was watching it. I was like, this is really silly. You got an Elvis impersonator guy, you have an African American guy who's saying that he's John F. Kennedy. There's kind of silly stuff that happens with like this scarab creature.
Mm,
Some of the dialogue is silly,
yeah.
but this movie has this like really intense, earnest quality to it
Yeah.
that it's like this bizarre flavoring. Like how
Yes.
Elvis himself had like peanut butter and banana sandwiches.
Yes.
That's what this movie is like. It's like this like weird silliness, but then this like incredible earnestness, which I think really gets driven home by the score of this movie.
Yes.
You
The
know?
score is amazing. The score is by Brian Tyler, who works a lot now. He did Scream 5 and 6. He did Super Mario Brothers. He did Abigail. He does a lot of work, and it's not only really great, and I think earnest is a really good word you use for it, but also with a film of this size, it's doing a lot of work in creating production value. It
Mm-hmm.
elevates the material. It doesn't, it's not patching up the material. The material is good, but it elevates it to a place where it's maybe more serious. I think the thing that you don't expect this movie to have is a really serious like meditation on ageism, how we
Mm-hmm.
treat elderly people. One of the minorities, which they're slowly becoming not a minority as boomers are getting older, but they're one of the minorities that people still kind of don't give a shit about. Um, which is crazy considering we will all eventually need elder care.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad. Elvis's roommate is this old man who's played by the guy who played from Saving Private Ryan, the old man who
Yeah.
yeah, he's
Yes, it's
old.
Mike.
He's old Private Ryan, right?
Right, right.
He like dies in the beginning. He's like just coughing, and you're kind of laughing at how ridiculous it is. And then he dies, and then his daughter comes, and she's like throwing out his purple heart and pictures of his life, and it's funny, but it's also like so sad.
Yeah. Yeah. As a person whose father is in a elderly care home, I can kind of understand. My dad was in like a rough home or situation before his current one, and I would go visit him. And I live in Texas and he lives in New York, so I wouldn't like be there frequently. Kind of see the people that work there, you see the people that live in these places, and you don't envy the people that spend the end of their lives in places like this.
Yes.
And when I was this movie again, it's been a while since I saw it. There's this whole sequence where Elvis or Sebastian Haff is like in a bed in the nursing home, and people move around him, but it's in that kind of, they use that effect where their bodies move real quick, like it's all
Yeah.
sped up, but he's just sitting there observing him.
Yes.
And it's like this very kind of stunted way of watching the people because like people just kind of pop into the room, pop out, pop in, pop out.
And you're
And I
kind of
think it
half
gives
asleep your whole life.
that right. That's exactly what I'm getting at, is that it's like this sense of you don't really know what's going on. You get little glimpses of things. And I thought it seemed very stylistic because it kind of like matched the filmmaking of that time. There's a lot of effects like that in
Oh
film
yeah,
at
yeah.
that time. But I feel like it does kind of capture that feeling of your mind is sort of in pieces at this point, and you're just kind of getting little glimpses and trying to patch it together, and you don't know what's going on. I thought that was pretty effective in the beginning of this.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And there's a moment where some of the dialogue is really good. Well, let me this movie has a lot of voiceover, which
Hmm.
in a sort of screenwriting book or screenwriting course, they would get this script and say there's too much voiceover. You've got to show not tell. But I also believe that you can break rules if you do it skillfully. What do you think
Hmm.
about the level of voiceover in this? Because there is a lot.
Yeah, I am sure. I actually have not read the short story that this is based on, but I am sure that everything that's in that narration is based on Joe Lansdale's writing. Like I think that
Yeah.
that's just taken right from the book, and that's one thing that I love about his books. Quite a few of them that I've read are like first person stories, and they're written by these characters that I think what coming from New York and stuff, when you see these characters in real life, you kind of judge them. You're like, oh, they're from Texas or they're from, the country. They're not that educated. You kind of have this elitist kind of attitude towards them. But when you read his stuff, they might talk in a certain way and sound like they're from the country, but there's like this crazy wisdom to
Mhm.
them. And the Elvis in this movie, uh he says a lot of ridiculous things, and a lot of his things that he says in his narration are like connected to Elvis,
Yeah.
things that we know.
Yes.
But there's like a very like he's keyed into what's going on, whether it's the nursing home experience or the thing with Bubba Ho-Tep.
Yeah.
He knows what's going on, and everyone else is oblivious to it.
Yeah.
And so, even though he says kind of goofy things in his narration, it's like he's very wise and
Yes.
clever, you know?
Yes. No, you're totally right. And, I'm not a huge Elvis fan, but like most people, I like a lot of his songs. Obviously,
Hmm.
he's got some great songs.
Hmm.
But I think this movie, if you are an Elvis fan, I think this movie is almost like a little bit of fantasy because it redeems him. It's a version of him where he didn't go down totally down the bad road and
Yeah.
tried to get out of it and maybe didn't totally succeed. Like I like when he's towards the end, or towards the middle of the end or whatever, the end of the middle, he's sort of they know about the mummy and they know about the threat, and he's sort of on the fence as to whether or not he wants to give a shit or not. Part of him is just wants to go to bed and say fuck it, and then part of him wants to try to fight the mummy. He sees on TV a commercial for like a marathon of Elvis movies, and he's like, he had I actually wrote it down. Where was it? It's really good. Oh, in the movies, I always played heroic types, but when the stage lights went out, it was time for drugs and stupidity and the coveting of women. Now it's time to be a little of what I always fantasized being, a hero.
Hmm.
And he talks about wishing he had been a better father to Lisa Marie and wishing he had fired his manager. Like
Right.
it's really it's kind of like you wish that were true.
Yeah. It's a bizarre movie because it's kind of ambiguous as to whether he actually truly is Elvis or he's a deluded old man, right? And I think they leave it open to interpretation where it could be the either one.
Yes.
When you watch it, you think, oh, well, this guy is just this deluded Elvis impersonator, and he's not the real Elvis. But then you're kind of like, wait, what if this actually is like,
Yeah.
because there's a fucking mummy in this movie, so like, it's not
Right.
too unreasonable to think that, right? Maybe this is Elvis. Maybe that guy is Jack Kennedy with,
Yeah.
sand in his skull, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, uh, you look at it one of two ways, but in either case, this is a man that kind of goes above and beyond what he's supposed to do or what he's expected to do at this point in his life. And
Yeah.
it has a very positive ending. I really love the ending. And I wanted to just circle back to the score because I want to talk
Yeah.
about how much the score influences how you feel about him,
Mhm.
because there's kind of like music they play when there's flashbacks to him either being an Elvis impersonator or like where he's claiming to be
Yeah.
Elvis. And it's got that sort of like Elvis showy kind of Vegas
Right, but
feel
it's
to it.
it's right, but it's obviously like, public domain Elvis sounding kind of music.
Right, right. And one part that feels the most Bruce Campbell is when he is Elvis or he thinks he's Elvis and he's doing like this last show where he's on stage and he thinks he's so awesome that he kind of like hurts his hip and then he falls off the stage. He goes, "Oh," it makes this noise. It seems so silly and you kind of are laughing at him. But then the score itself, when he's very serious and when his narration is serious, it almost has this like fucking like Michael Bay Armageddon or the rock type guitar riffs where it's like down, down,
Oh, yeah.
down. And man, I gotta tell you that when he has his like redemption at the end, it's like really
Oh,
touching.
it gives you chills.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
when at the end, him and Ozzy. And by the way, it's crazy that Ozzy Davis is in this movie because Ozzy Davis who plays Jack Kennedy. I think this was maybe his last movie, and he had an amazing career and like was an activist. I think he gave Malcolm X's eulogy. Like he was a really important. It was crazy that he's in this movie. Um,
Jesus.
and at the end, they decide they're gonna do something, and they're like, okay, they're like doing like a checklist. Okay, you got the rubbing alcohol check, you got the magic words check, and they're like, okay, outfits, and Jack Kennedy wears just like a nice suit, but Elvis has a white suit, which is pretty similar to the white suit he wore in his 1968 comeback special. It's like
Mhm.
one of the like notable Elvis looks. And then in slow motion, they come around the hallway, approach, the night or whatever, and it's slow motion, and you hear the bam, bam, bam,
You're
bam,
right.
and it's glorious. It's incredible. I remember seeing it in theater, and people went nuts. People like, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it is amazing. And it makes you laugh, but he also kind of it's like two things at once. And that's what I love about Joe Lansdale's writing because it's ridiculous, but then it's also awesome at the same
yeah,
time, you
yeah,
know? And it's funny because with Ozzie Davis in that little, Razzie scooter or whatever you call them, he kind of looks like Professor X, the way that he moves in that
yeah,
scooter.
yeah.
And so your brain is so programmed to think of Professor X and superheroes, so it kind of works when they're going down the hallway like
Yeah.
that. And this is maybe there's maybe like two X-Men movies out by this point when the movie came out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But his comedic delivery is like fantastic too. There's this really great fucking part where Elvis is explaining what's going on, and he's like started to do some research, and he offers him a ding dong, and he says, oh, not my ding dong, an actual chocolate ding dong, right? And he's like, oh, since I have been dyed, it actually would be a chocolate ding dong. Like it's so silly, but
Right.
it's funny as hell too.
Yeah. And then he says, let's get decadent as they eat like Baby Ruth bars.
You're right, right,
It's
right.
funny because it's like, for an older, first of all, I love candy, so I'm not mocking candy. I love candy. But like for someone at that point in their life, yeah, like having a drawer full of candy is, yeah, a highlight of your life, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I mean, they act exactly the way you expect old people to act. And one of the things about Joe Lansdale, I don't even know if this is from when I interviewed him or if it's just something I've read somewhere, but he said that he likes to just like listen to people talk and that like he'll take lines that people say in real life and just put them into his books and stuff. And they feel like old people that you would meet in a nursing home. And you could potentially meet an old person in a nursing home that thinks that they're John F. Kennedy or Elvis. I mean, maybe
yeah.
not something as spectacular as that, but you know, uh Jack, that's Ozzy. He kind of seems more like subdued or more like he's got more manners than Elvis. So like
Yeah.
at one point Elvis asks him, I gotta ask you about Marilyn. What was that like? And he just goes, it's classified. But then he goes, wow. He says like, between
Yeah.
you and me, wow. And that's such like an old person answer.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas if he was as crude as Elvis, he'd say something like, "Oh man, her tits were like that." Like he'd say something really
Yeah.
crude, but he's got that old person, um, you know, uh, class or whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I like little
Yeah.
touches like that.
And I think it's very sweet that they choose to believe each other.
Yeah,
When Elvis is like, whatever, it's somebody else's problem. I'm just gonna go to bed. Jack is like, hey, I know you're Elvis. And that's when he starts to listen to him. And,
yeah,
when we first meet Jack, it's funny because you've got this guy saying he's Elvis, but then when you first meet Jack, he's like, anyway, this guy thinks he's Jack Kennedy. He's certifiable. But then he starts to treat him like he's actually Kennedy. It's sweet, but also, like you said, is a movie with a mummy. So like maybe it is. It's funny. Like my instinct when I first saw it was to believe he really is Elvis, but not to believe that Jack is really Kennedy. But
hmm
it could really go either way. It could be neither of them are, or both of them are, or also it
hmm
doesn't matter. There is one like clue where the nurse says, when when Sebastian Half, which is the name of the impersonator, when he broke his hip, it got infected and he went into a coma for like 30 days or something. And when he came out, he was delusional. So there is an in-world reason to, you could reasonably say that he isn't Elvis, that it really is just some malady from breaking his hip.
Right.
But I think either way, what you have here, whether it be Elvis or any normal person, is it's about the idea of like, what if you did nothing in your whole life? What if your whole life you kind of wasted? You did drugs and you had a family, but you squandered that. You had talent, but you squandered that, and you're at the very end of your life. Here's one last chance to do anything for anybody, to do something good for other people. And this, what's at stake is, and it's ridiculous, is Ozzy Davis, Jack does some research and he finds out that, well, they find out that the mummy had like written hieroglyphic graffiti in the stall of the bathroom. And they realize that if he eats souls, that he must shit out souls, which means you don't get to go to heaven. Your soul stops existing. You're just shit and you get flushed down. So that's what's at stake, which is, obviously all these people are going to die because they're all older. And they make a joke about like every day the hearse driver's there and it's just every day somebody coming out.
Right.
What's at stake is their souls. He could save their souls.
Yeah. It's in my view, the way that I've always viewed this movie is that both men are delusional.
Mm.
That neither is Kennedy or Elvis, and they just are these delusional old men that have found each other in the nursing home. And to me, I think that actually makes it even more special because they're these two deluded men that just have to kind of be brave and go above and beyond to fight a fucking supernatural force. So that's kind of my interpretation I've always had.
Yeah.
It's funny because like the stakes are so high. They have this like bathroom humor when they're talking about consuming souls and shitting them out, and it's funny. It like makes you chuckle, but when you think of like what that actually means, it's like your fucking essence, like who you are. Like
Yeah.
even going to hell would actually maybe be better because at least you like still continue to exist. But this would
Yeah.
be like your existence is over. And it's funny too because like they talk about how they consume souls. There's all this dialogue of like Ozzy Davis talking about the mummy sucking the soul out of someone's asshole.
Yeah.
Like, and it just like the way they describe it, it's so funny. But it's just it's interesting because it's okay when you watch like horror movies and especially like modern horror movies. And if you watch anything that's in a genre, the stakes are always so high. It's always like, oh, this
Yes.
creature's
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
get out and infect everyone, or it's going to take over the world, or whatever. But in this case, it's like this thing is just going to basically pick off people in an old folks' home, and nobody cares about the people in the old folks' home.
Yeah.
So they have to do what they can to save themselves. So it's
Yes.
so small scale, but yet you're dealing with fucking ancient mummies and supernatural
Right.
powers.
But right. But there's a figurative analogy between them, right? Because you've got a mummy is someone who's old, right? Sometimes we call an old person a mummy. A mummy is somebody who's very old. Their body has aged and degraded. The mummy in this movie is very slow moving and is wearing tattered clothes, and also, like they make the point that it's not Tutankhamun. It's not like a big. It's just it's like nobody mummy that no one gives a shit about. So
Yeah,
similar to them, it's somebody that thinks that they're important but not really important, and
right.
there's a sort of analogy between them.
Yeah, it's funny because like you said what the budget's like $500,000 or something like
Yeah.
that, something like real small scale. I was trying to think of when the Mummy movies with Brendan Fraser came out. Before this, right? They came out like the late 90s.
Yeah, this is 2002, so I think the first Mummy is what is it? Mummy 1999.
Okay, so that's the first one with Brendan Fraser. And in the second one with Brendan Fraser, they kind of go
That's
more into
2001, so they both would have been out.
okay. And they go more into the mummy's origin in the second movie.
Yeah.
It's funny because they do kind of shoehorn this mummy origin sequence into this movie where
Yeah.
like the mummy and Elvis have like this psychic connection and he gets flashes into
Yeah,
his
yeah,
life.
yeah.
And it's weird because the story beats of the mummy's origin kind of match the story beats in the mummy returns
Yeah.
where there seems to be some kind of connection to a woman. It's funny because there's this sequence where they show ancient Egypt and they show these women in like Egyptian clothing and they're bare chested. And it's so like gratuitous and random, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
so
yeah.
out there. And then there's this whole sequence where they use that tool to scrape out the mummy's brain.
Yeah.
And it just kind of reminds you of the Mummy movies with Brendan Fraser.
Yeah.
Because there's a woman involved in his origin, and there's something horrible that happens to him as he's like mummified alive, I think, in both
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like, okay, so like Don Coscarelli has made all these horror movies or horror adjacent things, so you have to show that brain being scraped out. You have to show the naked women in ancient Egypt, and I mean, I even saw parallels there too because they talk about Jack talks about like what's happened to his brain after he was shot in
Yeah.
Dallas. And he's talking about how this piece of his brain saved somewhere, and then they show the mummy's brain being scooped out too.
Yes.
So I
Oh
was
wow.
thinking about those
Yeah.
connections,
Yeah.
but it's funny because the mummy stuff is kind of interesting, but it is so like like fifth thing on the list as far as like anything you'd be thinking about. The main thing is about Elvis and his experience in this rest home, his
Right.
friendship with Jack, and just how badly they have like how bad their life is in this nursing home, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about the mummy, I don't know if this kind of segues into another point you wanted to make, but there's something that happens in this movie that was very interesting to me that I feel like, Don Coscarelli might have been like ahead of his time or whatever for this. When the mummy talks, his captions are like Egyptian hieroglyphs that kind of
Yeah.
fly out of his mouth
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and then they turn into English. And I just
Yeah.
thought that was so cool for a low budget thing. I was like, oh, that's different.
Yeah.
I
I
like that.
agree. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he says like some ridiculous shit like suck. Oh, I forget what he said. He says so like he's like cursing him out.
Yeah. And he calls
Uh
him like a redneck limp dick or something. You limp dick redneck. He said something like that to Elvis.
yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Oh, eat the dog dick of Anubis, you asswipe.
Oh, okay, okay. All right. Well, my thing is nothing like that, but there was a dick in there, so
Oh, there might be more. Yeah, but yeah. Uh, well, again, I haven't read any other stuff by this writer, but clearly what he's playing with is pop culture, right? You could be lazy and just be like, "Hey, this movie takes place in the 80s. You like that, millennials?" Or you could actually use pop culture references in a meaningful way. And this movie does that, right? I mean, like The Mummy or A Mummy as a supernatural horror menace is it's a meme in the true sense of the word meme, right? It's a cultural concept. So is Elvis and the idea of Elvis never dying. So
right.
is the idea that something having to do with JFK's assassination was staged or something was up with it, right?
Yes.
Whatever. So he's sort of dealing with all of those things. It's like take all of those fantastic things and then put them in like the most sad, mundane setting you can imagine.
Right. Right.
Where people are like moaning in pain and it's just sad.
Yeah.
It's let's talk about the first victim of Bubba Ho-Tep is this older woman.
Yeah.
And the whole sequence where they introduce her, I think, is really fascinating
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because she's I think she has a walker. She's walking down the hallway and it's at night and it's very slow and she's all alone and she's obviously very, very old. And she comes across somebody with an iron lung, which is something that
Yep.
I don't think anyone has them any. I feel like whoever had the last iron lung must be dead.
Yeah.
Iron lungs for the younger listeners were like if you couldn't breathe on your own before we had, I guess, better technology to do that. An iron lung was like basically like a metal coffin that you just spent your whole life in. Like if you wanted to stay alive, it's the most miserable existence you can imagine. If you wanted to stay alive, you had to just stay in this thing all the time.
Yeah.
And so this woman comes, she sees another woman in an iron lung, and she comes up to her and like starts petting her hair, and it's like very nice, having a nice moment. And then she like takes the old woman's glasses off, puts them on to like test them, and just takes them.
Yes.
And then the
Yes.
woman in the iron lung is like, no, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's
then
it's an awful
yeah,
sequence, but you know what? Her finding her in the iron lung is so random and weird at first.
Yeah.
And it's very much like David Lynch, I
Yeah,
thought.
I
That
think so.
was like
Yeah,
just the kind of because she just kind of makes noises. They just kind of like look at each other. They don't say anything. Like
right.
neither of them say hi or anything like that. They just look at each other and one makes noises.
Yeah.
And so it is very David Lynch.
No, I
Um
agree. It's very bizarre.
yeah.
And then we see the woman steal somebody's candy.
Oh yeah, she's horrible.
Yeah, but don't you she is horrible. But don't you in some ways feel like that kind of desperation happens?
Of
Like
course.
you said your father is in a facility. Uh my grandmother lived a long time. She lived to I 90. She was almost 91, I think. And
Yeah.
it's some my mother tried to take care of her, but it was a full-time job and that she just couldn't do it. So she was
Yeah.
in a place, and I would visit her. We'd visit her for every holiday, and my mother visited her a lot. Um,
Right.
and those places suck. I mean, they're horrible. They
Yeah.
smell bad. You could always hear somebody crying. It's awful. And you would see like weird things. Like my grandmother was a friendly person, but towards the end of her life, she was very miserable. So she wasn't friendly.
Oh.
But her best friend in the home was this elderly Asian woman who didn't speak English. But she was like, "That's my friend," and we were like, "Well, how are you her friend?" And she was like, "Oh, we share Tic Tacs. I have Tic Tacs. I sometimes give it to her. She sometimes gives me, and we'll do crossword puzzles next to each other." Which is like
Wow.
such a. I mean, I'm glad she had that, but it's such a desperate definition of a friendship.
Yeah.
It's prison. It's so desperate. It's so desperate.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the sad thing about all of this, and I have this from my own experience with my father, is that people kind of reach a point in their life where they're not really like living because there's like a purpose or there's something like they're taking care of people. There's nothing really left. It's just like we're on a circle. We've
Yeah.
gone up the one arc and now we're going down the other. And that's like a major theme of this movie.
You're just in the way. You feel like you're in the way and people are waiting for you to go.
That's it. Exactly. It's just kind of like this is where you just kind of hang out until you're dead. And your story of your grandmother is an interesting one. And I like stuff like that. I don't necessarily like what your grandmother was in, but it is like really interesting, like what she did with that woman. For my
Yeah.
dad, for his example, like he goes and he plays bingo like almost every day. And when they play bingo, he wins like 5 cents or something. And that's
Yeah.
real exciting to win 5 cents, and then we sit here as a person that's not, necessarily in your prime, but we're in our middle age and we're like 5 cents, Jesus Christ, like that's
Right.
nothing. That's like lint in your pocket, right? And he gets excited about like eating certain types of cookies or getting things from the vending machine. Like
Yeah.
that's exciting to him.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the way um they react when Jack has the ding dongs and the
Yeah,
baby Ruth bars.
right,
Or even the stealing glasses. People lose their glasses and glasses are expensive, and even Medicaid will only cover one pair of glasses every couple years or whatever. So
right,
this woman stealing another woman's glasses,
right.
probably she needs glasses, and she sees glasses and she takes it. So it's so fun. It's just desperate. It's like that's why I say it's like prison, like where they like you have an economy like in prison they'll use cigarettes like money. It's like
Right,
candies instead of cigarettes. It's like
right.
sad world of complete desperation and the way that they talk to them. Like Don Coscarelli has a cameo in this movie as the administrator of the nursing home.
Yeah,
And then there's also a character who's a nurse who's really good. And they talk to them like babies and they yell at them for being out at night. And they
yeah,
even when they're like trying to fight the mummy, they're like little kids, like, oh, we can't get caught, or we'll get in trouble.
yeah.
And it's very it's sad, but it's crazy how that's what you end up in a way.
Yeah, yeah. All the people, like you said, they talk to him like babies. He's got that one nurse who he has some like real interesting interactions with. The whole thing with the nurse is an interesting scenario too, because he talks about his dick a lot, right?
Yeah, I
And
was
he
gonna
talks about
bring
this,
that up. We haven't talked about that yet.
yeah, and obviously there's this whole sense of like male impotency, right? And like just kind of like, well, this is a big part of your life at one point. Now it's completely gone. And then he
Yeah.
flashbacks. He has like a little bit of pride at one point, and we could talk about that more detail. But at one point, I think his last interaction with that nurse, he's like very mean to her. Like he just
Yes.
snaps at her. And that's another common thing with people in elderly homes.
Yes.
You know, you and I, we've worked in the industry where we're helping individuals with like special needs. I worked at a place where it was a day hab for people
Yeah.
with special needs, and they were elderly. And you know, they would sometimes just be really mean randomly, and you kind of
Yeah.
would take it to heart. And I just felt like that was a very accurate reaction that he had when he like lost his patience with this
Yeah.
woman. You know,
Yeah.
she's trying to be like sweet and she's kind of condescending because she doesn't think he's all there. And then
And
he
she
like
doesn't
snips
think
at
he's
her.
Elvis, but she calls him Elvis like in a patronizing way.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
he
mean
says
like
like treat me like a baby again, and I'll wrap this fucking
yeah.
walker around your head or something like that.
Yeah, it's intense, man.
So yeah, so okay, so this other thing that's going on, right, is Elvis has a growth. We don't see it,
No, thank God.
but Elvis has a growth at the tip of his dick.
Right.
Um, that the nurse puts like this topical cream on that's supposed to, I guess, heal it. And Elvis keeps saying, "No one's telling me the truth. It's cancer." Which is interesting because when I first saw this younger, I thought, "Oh yeah, it's cancer." But now that I'm older and I know more about the world, it's very possible that it's not. But old people will often think that they're being lied to.
Yes,
You know what I mean?
yes, yeah.
Like they'll have a cold and they'll be like, "You guys aren't telling me the truth. I have cancer," and that could be what's happening. It really could just be a topical cream that he needs. But you got, but then you got to think about like it's a very obvious metaphor, but I think it works. You got to think about Elvis, right? Elvis was the king. He had a lot of sex, right? He was a rock star who, like fucked a lot of like groupies and stuff. So obviously at one point, right, his penis was a big part of his whole existence, right? Even like when he was first on TV and he would like shake his hips, it was alluding to, sexual movement, and that got him in trouble or censored. So
Right,
now he's in his 70s or whatever, and he can't get an erection. And not only that, this young, attractive woman, like her job is to like put this salve on his penis, and like it does his penis doesn't do anything, and like there's nothing sexual about it. There's a great line where the not the neighbor, the roommate who dies, when his young daughter comes to pick up his stuff, she's like very attractive young woman,
yeah.
and she bends over and you could see her panties, and the line is, the revealing of her panties wasn't intentional or unintentional. She just didn't give a damn. She
Right,
is so physically and sexually non-threatening. She didn't mind if I got a bird's eye view of her love nest.
right,
It was
right,
the same to her as a house cat sneaking a peek. I felt
right.
my pecker flutter once, like a bird having a heart attack. Then it, then it laid back down and remained limp and still.
Yeah. Fantastic. I'm sure that is taken straight from the story, you know?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, he talks a lot about feeling invisible. Like this girl shows him doesn't care that he could see up her dress because he's nothing to her. She's
Right.
invisible. Or at one point he says "fuck you" and they giggle and he goes, "You get so old, people aren't even mad when you curse at them. They think it's sadly amusing." Which is
Yeah.
it's real. It's true. Um,
Yeah. I mean, like, the thing that's amazing about this movie is that, like, there's talk about souls and sucking souls. Like, you know, they get them out of the orifices of our body, right? And at one point, our bodies, which are like the containers of our souls, just basically can't handle the things that we enjoy doing or want to do. And
yes.
and then essentially like when they try to do things with their bodies that they couldn't do before, they ultimately die, right? You know,
Yeah.
they take on a mummy, and the mummy's got some powers and stuff, but he's slow. He's a fucking mummy, right?
Yeah.
Like, if this was an action movie and it was the same type of mummy, they just would have like shot him to pieces or ripped his fucking head off
Right. Right.
easily.
Right. Right.
But he's just, he's going up against a guy in a scooter thing and a walker guy. Um, so it's funny because like basically they have to like use up what's left of their bodies just to do this heroic act, which is just to take on this mummy.
Yeah.
That would be kind of lame if he was fighting, people in their prime or
Yeah.
middle age,
Yeah. At one point, to sort of investigate Elvis they heard the Ozzy Davis actually has a really funny line that you could miss because it's so fast. He says, Jack goes, the girl who calls herself my niece came to pick me up today and we went to the library.
Yeah.
Um, because you could just imagine his niece he'd be like, I'm JFK, and she's like, oh, okay, sure, Uncle Jack. Um,
Right.
and he learns about that a mummy was being transported in a bus and it crashed near the creek near their home. So
Yeah.
Elvis basically just has to like walk across the street and like down a steep hill.
Yeah.
But with his walker, like he's got a bad hip. It's like climbing a mountain. It's such a, and you're worried that he's gonna fall. You're like, oh God, don't fall. And he doesn't, but like it takes everything out of him. Like you see him again and he's like sweating. Just
Yeah.
doing that is such a huge. That's why I love this movie is so small in a way.
Yep.
Everything about it's small. The movements are small. The threat is small.
Hmm.
The everything about it's small. And the other characters, it's not like the Avengers, right? Like the other characters don't even know what's going on. No one knows that
Yeah.
they saved them or anything like that.
Right. Right.
Um, but a scene that's really interesting, getting back to the other thing is when they start having this adventure and the mummy, they're learning about the mummy and stuff. When the nurse is putting the stuff on him, he gets excited and he says, this hasn't happened in years, and it's because I feel like I'm living again.
Right. Right. He
Which
gets
is
a vitality from like this experience, like something actually interesting and exciting is happening, you know? And it's not because like they ask to do some kind of new activity. They're not like talking to the nursing home people and the nursing home people are like, we're gonna try jazzercise now. Or like there's nothing like that where they're like actively trying to change their lives or like some outside person comes in to make their lives more exciting. It's not that type
yeah,
of movie. Their excitement comes because there's this fucking supernatural thing in there that's gonna kill them all
yeah,
unless they do something about it. So, they would just be in there and just die,
yeah,
unless this weird supernatural thing happened. And so I don't know, like it's cool because it's almost like Cocoon or something,
yeah, yeah,
but in
yeah,
a bad way, right?
yeah.
Because these people get a new lease on life, but it's because of the danger of being killed versus like their lives being extended by these aliens, right?
Well, there are studies that show that people who retire younger die younger.
Oh yeah, that makes
So
sense.
having a purpose keeps you alive.
Hmm.
I mean, luckily you and I won't have that problem because we're millennials and we will never retire because there won't be Social
Exactly.
Security by the time we're ready to retire.
We're a
Um,
planet, so we're
oh
good.
yeah, right, it'll be fine. I'm gonna drop dead at work, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, like I mean, if you've got nothing to live for, of
Hmm.
course you're not gonna, get it up. You, you know what I mean? Like, what are you getting it up for? Uh,
Yes. Is that how you end the episode? If you got
and
nothing to live for, that's how you.
what are you gonna get it up for?
Well, I think
No, no.
I think we should talk about how it actually ends because the
Yes,
ending
please, yeah.
is so great, right? So like the two confront Bubba Ho-Tep, right?
Yeah.
And he's outside. When they fight him, Bubba Ho-Tep essentially just like kind of sneaks up on Jack. He goes to like suck his soul out of his body, but then Elvis goes to save him.
Mm,
They do spray him with gasoline and like kind of light him on fire at first, but he's able to get away.
yeah.
Then Jack dies because Bubba Hotep messes him up and his body just can't
Yeah.
take it. And then Elvis comes flying at Bubba Hotep in the scooter
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
And then they fall down a fucking cliff, and that's essentially what does them.
Right.
That's
Well,
what
actually,
that,
it's the same cliff that I was just talking about. It's the
right.
by the creek. Yeah, and he's got like a rib coming out. Elvis is like really fucked up.
Yeah. And then he's able to get gasoline onto Bubba Hotep and then he lights a match. And he says kind of like cheesy Elvis things. He's like
Yeah,
TCB,
yeah,
taking care
yeah,
of business. He says stuff like that. But when he's dying, I just really love it because they go hard with that guitar that they play when
yeah.
it's like the serious moments. And then the stars
Mm,
form into hieroglyphs and then they translate the hieroglyphs and it says all is well,
yes.
and then his last words are thank you very much, but he kind of like trails off as he's saying it. But that's
Yeah.
like such a perfect thing for this Elvis character to say when he's dying. Thank you very
Yeah,
much,
yeah,
right?
and it's such a happy ending. Even though they
Yeah,
die, they were elderly. They were going to die anyway, but they got a chance to do something important.
to save people.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And I mean, I think they know they're going to die, right? Like when they take on this mission, I feel like they know they're gonna die.
Yeah.
Um, Essentially, there's a really funny moment in that scene where they like split up, and Jack goes one way and Elvis goes the other way, and then Elvis sees the mummy, and he's like, "Jack, Jack," and then you just see Jack asleep in his scooter.
Oh,
um,
it's a really fucking funny movie,
it is
you
a very,
know?
I know we're making it sound very serious. It's a very funny movie. It's ridiculous. I mean, like,
Yeah.
there's a whole like the most ash he is in the movie is there's a whole scene where he like fights this giant scarab flying around and he's poking at it with a fork and he's
Yeah.
doing like bullshit karate moves.
Right. Yeah, he traps it under a bedpan at one point.
Yeah. So
Yeah, when you're watching it, you almost kind of feel embarrassed to see that scene, but it's just kind of for fun and for excitement,
yeah,
just to kind of add a little more energy to the movie. It's funny because I wanted to make sure that we discussed it that Bubba Hotep doesn't just end with this movie. Like there's more to it after that.
tell me more because I know that I remember at the time Don Coscarelli was trying to make a prequel called Bubba Nosferatu,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but I don't know.
So
There's comics too, right?
yes, so here I'll download for this. Bubba Nosferatu is like a sequel that they tease at the end of this movie, like in the credits,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah,
Bubba Nosferatu, Curse of the She Vampires.
yeah,
And so that was just a joke. But then Bruce Campbell was like excited about making this movie, even though it was just a joke in the
yeah,
credits, right? And they were developing a script and stuff for it. But then at one point, I think Don Coscarelli and Bruce Campbell disagreed about what was going to happen in it.
yeah.
Uh, and they were going to have Paul Giamatti play the Colonel, right?
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and it was going to be a prequel to um, Bubba Hotep. Then at one point they were talking to Ron Perlman, and Ron Perlman was very interested in playing Elvis. I honestly think that would not have been good casting because like
No, yeah,
Bruce Campbell, at least on some level, kind of can resemble Elvis or at least older
yeah, yeah,
Elvis. Ron Perlman, kind of looks like a lion or something, right?
yeah. It's weird. Yeah.
So what eventually happened, and this happens with so many properties like this on like this level, is that it was made into a comic,
Oh
and it
shit.
and it was made into a comic that was called Bubba and the Cosmic Bloodsuckers that Joe Lansdale wrote, and that came out in 2017.
So okay, so Joe Lansdale did write the comic, but he did he have
Yes.
anything to do with that second movie that they were
Uh,
thinking about?
I think he was writing the script, but I think that Don Coscarelli, I can't with 100% certainty say that Joe Lanzo was writing the script. Uh, it might have been just Don Coscarelli writing it. One other thing I wanted to bring up too was that in horror, well, specifically horror literature, there's probably the biggest award is the Bram Stoker Award,
Mhm.
and Don Coscarelli won the Bram Stoker for the screenplay for Bubba Hotep the year that it came out.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
awesome.
But just going back to comics, they Joe Lansdale wrote the script because Joe Lansdale's written comics as well. And actually, since we're just kind of going all over the place, I just wanted to point out too, Joe Lansdale actually wrote episodes of Batman the Animated Series as well.
Oh, okay.
And his favorite one, and probably the most well-known one, is the one when Batman is captured by the Mad Hatter and he's like living inside of a dream. Do you
Oh
remember that
shit, yeah,
episode?
yeah,
So
yeah.
Joe Lansdale wrote that episode, right? He wrote other ones too, but he wrote that one.
And he
He wrote one
can't
that had
read in a dream, and that's how Batman figures it out. That blew my
yes,
mind as
that
a
episode.
kid.
Exactly, ditto. And Joe Lansdale, and I promise I won't go off at any more tangents, but Joe Lansdale wrote this one episode that features Jonah Hex quite a
Uh-huh.
bit. And it has Ra's al Ghul and stuff in Batman the Animated Series. Because he wrote a lot of Jonah Hex comics too for DC.
Interesting.
But
Yeah, yeah.
what I was gonna say was my last thing with Bubba is that besides Bubba and the Cosmic Bloodsuckers, which came out in 2017, there actually was a crossover comic, Army of Darkness slash Bubba Ho-Tep.
Okay.
Yeah, where
Of
like
course there
Ash
was.
and Elvis team up.
Of course. Of course. Um, I don't know if I would have. I like to see more, yes, but I don't know. A prequel would, like you get the sense that when he meets his mummy, it's the first magical thing he's ever seen. So if we had a prequel, and then like he's fighting vampires, and then it would kind of also definitely answer the question if he really is Elvis. I don't know if it would have
Right,
worked,
right.
but I do want to read those comics.
Yeah.
Because it is this singular story, and like I feel like unless you were like a Bruce Campbell fan or a Don Coscarelli fan, like I feel like no one talks about this. It's not on Shudder. I
Mm.
remember a few years ago I showed it to a friend of mine. Like it was like Halloween. I was hanging out with this person, and their younger sibling was there, who's like younger to me, is like in their mid-20s, and they were like, what the fuck is this? They liked it,
Yes.
and it's just I feel like we have to ring the bell for this movie. Like this movie should be on Shudder. This needs to like be on lists of things. This is a good movie.
Yeah.
Um, Pete, thank you so much for being here. Peter is the co-host of the Lastercast, which is a horror themed based ish podcast and YouTube channel. Although they did recently do
Blade
Blade
Runner.
Runner,
Yeah.
and then also Comic Books Transformed, which you do with Brian. So tell us a little bit about those channels and what's going on with them.
Yeah, sure, sure. So for the Laster Cast, Danny and I just basically review horror movies and streaming shows that come out when they come out. We just did Alien Romulus at the time of this recording. We have had a lot of success covering things that are related to Interview with the Vampire. So I think that
Mm,
we're gonna cover the book, The Vampire
nice,
Lestat, because
nice.
that's one of my favorite books of all time.
I haven't
And
read that one. I read the first one.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Vampire Lestat's awesome. It's from his perspective. And then there's other horror movies. Danny does a great job of covering like everything. He has one of those AMC passes and just goes to
Yeah.
the movies like all the time. He's just always dropping reviews. On Comic Books Transformed, Brian and I pretty much have the same kind of formula. We talk about things that have been adapted from comics into streaming shows and movies. Recently, we have been covering the Umbrella Academy because like
Mhm.
the 6 episodes of the 4th season just dropped. We're gonna maybe take a stab at that Batman Caped Crusader show that was
Okay.
on Amazon Prime, and then there's actually a Terminator animated
Yeah.
show coming on Netflix at the end
That
of
looks
this month.
cool.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
looks cool.
So we cover stuff like that, and it's just two middle-aged dudes talking about things in both shows. So if that appeals to you, you can always check them out on YouTube or Spotify.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Peter, thank you so much for being here. We end every episode by saying go bye bye. Could you say go bye bye for us?
How about I say it like Elvis?
Sure, if you can.
Oh, all right. Go bye bye.